back with Overtime at Old Favorite Friday, and we are drinking a beer that has been suggested many times, that I have had a hard time finding. I've been wanting to do this beer since early on, and I finally was at a Total Wine and More. I saw a label that I had never seen before, and it turns out it is the steam beer from Anchor Brewing, which is radically different than the last time I saw it. I might have just passed over this beer many times in the last few months, because I think they did the rebranding last year and just not realized it. But Ralph, we've never talked about label design or anything. What do you think about the label of this beer? What do you think about this compared to the classic version of this beer?
I mean, for me personally, it's a bit of a shock just because the company is so storied, and I think of Anchor, Anchor as having a very, with all their beers, whether it's their steam beer or their Christmas ale, having like a very specific design. But I mean, if you're trying to go cleaner and like more modern, they nailed it. So it's not a bad design by any means. For me, I'm so used to just saying one thing for so long.
I love the classic bottle because there's no other brewery that has bottles like this, and I do think that this jumps off the shelf at you as far as the color and the contrast. And I was doing a little bit of research for this. I was reading up on the rebranding, and when they first did it, people were not kind, and I think a lot of it is just people are used to what they're used to, and any change is gonna frustrate them. But enough about the label design. Let's talk about the beer. You and I were at a beer fest recently, and I think one of the things we loved the most was there was a great brewery in Gatlin Hall, I believe, in Orlando, that did tons of really great lagers. This is a beer with lager yeast fermented at ale temperatures. Right? This is a California Common or a steam beer. I feel like I've been immersed in these kind of clean, malty lagers recently. This is basically what we're doing here. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's really interesting because especially even the way this beer is brewed at the time, it was out of necessity, and it's rare that you see beer styles, modern beer styles, that mimic that so much, because a lot of time you can think of like an IPA now would have not been the same, let's say 100 years ago. But this beer is something that obviously did well then, and for the most part, even reading up about Anchor in the past, they've been pretty true to what it is. And it's as a brewer and beer drinker, like, that has certain aspects that it's a lager, but the fruity character that you wouldn't necessarily expect, but you get from the warmer fermentation, is a really nice addition to what you would think of just a clean, kind of almost amber lager.
Yeah, so we've also had some conversations about caramel malt and in beers, which sometimes you get a little frustrated with. Is the balance right for this one, Ralph?
I think for this one it is, because it's one of those. Yes, I will admit I'm very anti-caramel malt most of the time, but there's certain styles, even like porter we're doing recently, but there's certain styles where it does add something, and I'm fine with that if it kind of actually brings something to the table more than detracts. And it's very, whatever the recipe is, because I'm sure that's one of those that's probably locked away at this point, but they kind of pick and chose the right malts to kind of give you layers without detracting from the yeast character or anything else of the beer. So
I think the malt flavor in this one is spot on. I love the drinkability. I know it's an overused term, but it is. It's clean, it's dry. It's a lot of times you sacrifice the drinkability of a beer by throwing a bunch of stuff at it, right? There's too many malts, the palate gets a little bit confused, ends up being too sweet. This is just dead on. It's dry, malty, it's got a good hop balance without being a hoppy beer, but there's a little bit of bitterness that is perceivable, but not a feature of the beer, which I really, really like. And it's a classic. It's one of the, I did not research too in depth, but this is one of the oldest breweries in the country. Right? Do you know that?
It's like 18. I don't remember the exact date, but it's like late 1800s. They've been around since.
And this beer has been around since, I think, at least the 1960s.
Yeah, in its modern incarnation, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about one of the breweries that laid the foundation for everything that we have. Because without breweries like this doing this, would we have ever had the modern craft beer brewing revolution? And I have to say no, right?
Yeah, because I mean, there's breweries like that, and there are very few, because unfortunately a lot of them did over time fall by the wayside. But if it wasn't for a couple of breweries like this that have been around for, some are 80, in this case more than like 120 or so years, you wouldn't have even, I don't think there would have been that idea of like, oh, wait a minute, it's not just macro, even though this is definitely a larger scale brewery. if there wasn't people like this, I don't think you'd have a Sierra Nevada, because there'd be none of that, like, oh, we could do that, you know. They wouldn't have that aha moment of, it doesn't just have to be one way.
Yeah, and when I grew up in Michigan, I didn't know a beer like this existed. I thought everything was macro lagers and, you know, faux pilsners. And if I would have found this beer earlier on, it would have changed my trajectory of when I would have gotten this industry and when I would have become very interested in craft beer. So it's really cool. I'm glad that we finally able to do this beer, because when you do a series called Old Favorite Friday, this is a beer that has to be incled, right?
For
By
sure.
necessity.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I hope that it is on the shelves everywhere. I hope that I wasn't able to find it and it was there the whole time over the last year or so, and maybe I just didn't see it. But if it's out there, I highly suggest people picking it up if it's the first time in a long time, or because you're getting into the craft beer scene now with 10 billion choices. Maybe you just never had a chance to try this beer because you thought, it's been around forever and, you know, it's probably not gonna be that good. Guys, it's really good. It's a really, really good beer. It's a style of beer that very few people do, which is exciting. And if you're one of the kind of people that wants to try a little bit of everything, you got to try a California Combat.
Oh, for sure.
You got to give that a shot. So hope you guys pick it up. I hope you come back to watch any more Old Favorite Friday videos. Click around. If you want to leave a comment and tell us here what beers we should be drinking next, or just tell us, you know, that you don't like this beer, you do like this beer, whatever your thoughts are. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.